Now we will have Allison Smith, Director of Public Policy for the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, where she works on public policy issues and coordinates the agency's economic justice work. She has spent almost 9 years fighting domestic violence, including work at the Northwest Georgia Family Crisis Center, the Clark County Department of Family and Children's Services, and the Athens Area Homeless Shelter. She has a bachelor and master's degrees in social work from the University of Georgia. Allison will discuss domestic violence in the workplace and past and upcoming legislation, including what we can do as community members to help with getting new laws passed to fight domestic violence. Please help me in welcoming Allison Smith.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Allison Smith. I'm with the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, and our role is we don't provide direct services. What we do is provide training and technical assistance to those programs in the state that do provide those services. And we also do a lot of public policy and systems advocacy work that helps to hopefully make the work on the ground easier. So I'm going to talk a little bit about domestic violence in the workplace and then give you a little bit of a legislative update. So last year, I remember I was talking about the recession, and unfortunately, I think we're still experiencing that today. And it's really given a lot of us who have jobs a newfound appreciation for those jobs, because what a job represents for most people is a sense of self-sufficiency, a sense of independence. It's often how we identify ourselves. It's how we give our families and ourselves a decent life, highly correlated with child well-being and educational outcomes. And it's basically just how we take care of our basic needs, food, clothing, and shelter. And so when you think about what a job represents for someone who's experiencing domestic violence, it means all that and more, because it can be a ticket out of abuse. It can be a way for her to not have to deal with him for those few hours. It gives her a chance to make friends and not be isolated. It gives the same sense of accomplishment that we all experience with jobs. And it can really be a difference between safety or further abuse. What her job represents to someone who uses violence is that it's a threat to their control. She's got her own money. She's got this separate life without him, and it really shows a potential for him to lose his hold on her. So some folks who use violence use the workplace as a way to sabotage, and they sabotage this both at home and at work. So you may see things like him just dropping in on her or calling or texting her. Or he may be harassing her at home, so keeping her up at night so she can't be well rested for work, or taking her bus passes, or disabling her car, saying he's going to take care of the kids and then not take care of the kids so that she can't go to work. So we know that this happens a lot. In fact, when we've studied what domestic violence victims say about their employment and their experience with being abused, 96% of victims say that they've experienced some difficulty in the workplace. And even worse yet, 25 to about 50% say they've actually lost a job due to domestic violence. So how this plays out, if you're an employer, things to look for, things like unexplained absences and tardiness, lower productivity. She may have some unexplained injuries or be inappropriately dressed, or wear excessive makeup to cover up some evidence of abuse. She may be particularly withdrawn and change in behavior in terms of sensitivity around talking about her home life. And she may just have a special sensitivity around those issues. What you'll see out of the person who's abusing them, you'll see the drop-ins and calls that I mentioned before. You may see her having to come in and immediately call and report that she's come to work because he's keeping tabs on her. If he's coming to your workplace, he may be threatening you, threatening coworkers, just generally making a scene. And if someone that you actually employ is using abuse, then you can guarantee that they are abusing your time as well, because many people who use abuse also are using your company resources in order to abuse. So they're using your phones, they're basically doing things on company time that are trying to sabotage her work. So some may wonder, is this the business of an employer? Is this just a family matter? And really, it's really in your best interest if you're an employer for this to be on your radar and for you to have a plan, because every good employer knows to protect their assets, and your biggest asset is your employee. And it's extremely common. We know that about 21% of full-time employed adults report currently being abused. That's a lot if you think about 1 out of every 5 people in your office. And there's actually a survey done around Atlanta where 83% of businesses acknowledge that domestic violence is a problem for their employees, but only about 15% of them have any kind of policy on how to deal with it. And if you think about this in the context of liability, just if you take the human element out of it, you're talking about a potential risk for your employees if you don't know how to deal with this. And I don't like to talk in extremes, but sometimes that's the only way people can hear you. It definitely, beyond the issues around the safety in the actual workplace, it costs employers a lot of money in terms of lost wages, medical costs, and mental health costs. That's estimated at about $8.3 billion a year when you add up lost work days and lost productivity. They estimate that about 8 million lost work days are the result of domestic violence. So employers really need to know their role in this. They need to recognize, respond, refer, and reach out. So just recognizing the issue, knowing the signs, getting educated about it. And really, if you see these signs, just ask. Just say, I've noticed this behavior, these things that you're doing, or this way that you are presenting in the workplace. I'm worried for you. I want to talk to you about this. And I think it's important to realize that most folks aren't going to just say, well, wow, yes, you've noticed I'm abused. Thanks. I'll do something about it. It's really just about planting a seed, and it's about establishing that in your workplace and in your policy that if you choose to abuse, we won't tolerate it. And if you, as an employer, are being abused, we are here to help you. Responding appropriately in the workplace environment. It's so important just to have a protocol about this. Have it communicated in your employee policies, and have it communicated in subtle ways, like having brochures and pamphlets available, having signs inside the stalls of your women's bathrooms. Very, very, very simple ways to communicate the message that you are that you want your employees to feel comfortable enough to come to you and tell you when they're having a problem, because so many victims are so afraid of losing their jobs or being retaliated against. So it's important to create a supportive environment around that. There's some things that you can do if you have someone who's being abused at the workplace, things that, starting with your security all the way up to your supervisors, things as simple as relocating where they are in the office, or changing their job schedule a little bit to accommodate their needs. Finding out if this person has a protective order and if they'd be willing to share it with you, and if you could get a description of what this person looks like. Also know how to refer. Know of professionals that you can refer to when you talk to someone at your workplace who said, yes, I'm having some trouble. So get to know Women's Resource Center. If you have an employee assistance program, make sure that they're actually trained to know what to say and what to do when you've got somebody who's being abused or you're working with someone who is using abuse. And then reach out into the community. And again, I would point you to the resources that you have in Women's Resource Center because you don't have to solve all of this. on your own, and they are there to specifically work with folks who need assistance in figuring this stuff out. You can also reach out to our organization, the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence, because we do have some model workplace protocols and response plans that you can use. So I'll move on to a legislative update. The Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence does a lot of work with the state legislature and also with federal level policymakers to influence policies that and promote laws that enhance safety for domestic violence victims, and that also promote accountability for those who use violence. So I'll give you a little review of kind of what's happened in the last year as far as public policy work. And I say this because it's so important that people in the community let legislators know, let your members of Congress know that this is an issue that's important to you. They get a lot of calls, and you want to be right in there with them, making the phone calls, because otherwise you're letting other people speak for you. So I encourage you to really think about these issues, and when you do see newspaper articles about them, because we frequently will publish things talking about current laws that impact domestic violence victims, pick up the phone and make a phone call. And if you'd like, you can sign up for an action alert from us where we will let you know when you should speak out, when you should make the phone calls, who to call, and what to say. So this past year, on the federal level, we saw the reauthorization of the Violence Against Women Act, which is a law that was passed in 1994 that provides a lot of protections for domestic violence victims, and also authorizes a lot of the federal dollars that domestic violence programs get and that law enforcement gets and that prosecutors get in your communities. Really, it enables them to really respond appropriately to domestic violence. So that law was set to expire, and it was controversial for some reason this year, but we got it passed. So that was very important. On the state level, one of the bills that we worked on this year was House Bill 86, which allows law enforcement to make an arrest when there's a violation of a stay-away condition. So prior to the law being passed, if someone was arrested for domestic violence and then bonded out, and was what they call a stay-away order was put in place, that person could go right back over to the victim's house and harass them. And when law enforcement was called, if they were called, they couldn't make an arrest on the scene. Instead, they had to go file what they call a revocation of the bond. So that obviously is problematic. So that law actually streamlined that process so that law enforcement can make an arrest on the scene. We also helped work on House Bill 78, which was a bill that really expanded some of the protections for our most vulnerable elderly adults. It added sexual abuse to the list of crimes. That was actually not considered specifically a crime around elders. And it expanded some of the mandated reporting requirements and also enhanced some of the penalties for those who use violence. Actually, DeKalb County in particular is very, very good in its prosecution of elder abuse cases. Those were the good things. Some things that we're going to see coming up this year in our state legislature are most definitely is a bill to expand the access to firearms in our state, which is problematic. There's a very lethal combination when you're talking about firearms and domestic violence. So we're concerned about how access plays out in terms of access of perpetrators of domestic violence to firearms. So we will be trying to educate lawmakers this year about why that is a problem. Another thing that we're probably going to see is issues around funding. We've gone through a lot of state budget cuts a lot of federal cuts, so we'll be at the Capitol advocating for consistent funding for domestic violence programs. We'll also be working on a bill called the Family Care Act, which basically says to employers, if you provide sick leave as a part of your employee benefit package, you must allow employees to use that sick time flexibly, which means not just if the employee themselves are sick. So using it to care for elderly parents, using it to care for sick children, using it to care for sick siblings. And this is important for domestic violence victims because if you think about when you have a victim who's left, they overnight become a single parent. And so they're the only one in the household who's got to take care of the children when they're sick and also go and work. So it's important to allow that flexibility. So we're going to be working on that issue as well. And the final issue that we're probably going to be working on, because, and I say probably because we haven't solidified our public policy agenda, is the issue of strangulation, which a lot of folks will call choking. We are working on drafting a bill that would actually turn that into a felony offense. 37 other states have already done it. And it's because really when someone puts their hands around someone's neck, that's use of deadly force. And it's because it's not actually choking, it's cutting off the blood flow to the brain. It kills brain cells. And it takes so little pressure to do it. So if you think of like a firm handshake, that's about 8 pounds of pressure. It only takes 4 pounds of pressure for about 10 seconds to cause permanent brain damage. A little more pressure can cause someone to pass out within 10 seconds, and that's permanent brain damage. And the scary thing about it is that usually it doesn't leave any marks besides a little redness. It is lethal without leaving those marks. So because of that, it's really hard to track. A lot of victims will minimize it, but it is terrifying because he's literally got her life in his hands, and it's so common. Studies vary, but it's between 24 and 68% of those who are seeking services for domestic violence actually report that they have been strangled. And what he's doing when he's doing that is he's usually not strangling in order to kill. He's strangling to show that he can kill. So it really has a powerful effect on victims. In fact, also we know it's very highly correlated with eventual domestic violence homicide. A victim who's been strangled is about 7 times more likely to eventually be killed. It's very lethal. We need to treat this crime very seriously, and we need to have a law that reflects the seriousness of this type of assault. So that's what we're going to be working on in partnership with the Georgia Commission on Family Violence and hopefully prosecutors across the state. And with that, I will close. Thank you so much for having me here.
I'm going to introduce our next speaker. But before we do that, I wanted to ask how many tweeters do we have in the room? Oh, yeah, we have a couple. Well, I want to tell you that besides having this event streamed live across the county, I have also been live tweeting this morning. And so I'd encourage all of you that are tweeters to live tweet with me. And also those of you that are watching from home, please join and send your messages, your comments. I mean, this is a really great way to get information out. So you can follow me on Twitter at Sherry Boston SG. And if you are tweeting from the audience or from home, please use the hashtag DKDV or the hashtag domestic violence awareness. So please help me spread the word on social media and thank everybody today. So please do that if you're home or here. Let's tweet. Now I would like to introduce the Honorable Nora Polk, who is a judge for the DeKalb County Magistrate Court. Judge Polk holds a Juris Doctor from the University of Cincinnati's College of Law. She worked for the Atlanta Legal Aid Society for more than 8 years, where her caseload included domestic violence cases, and she was the supervising attorney for the Gwinnett office. In July of 2007, she partnered with a fellow Atlanta legal aid supervising attorney to form Ashby and Polk, where she represents clients in family law matters. The Honorable Nora Polk will explain temporary protective orders as well as citizens' warrants. So thank you so much, and help me join her in welcoming Judge Polk.
Good morning, everyone, and it's nice to see so many familiar and smiling faces today. I would like to say thank you to Solicitor General's office for having this forum every year. As you can see, and as you've been able to tell from the previous speakers, it continues to be a necessity. We continue to need to educate the community, and I want to let you know of a resource that is available. What the DeKalb County Magistrate's Office does is we sit by designation for the Superior Court of this county and handle the domestic violence cases, the civil protective orders. If someone is in an abusive situation and they feel that they need to get away, for their safety, they need some separation and protection, they can come to this court and request a family violence protective order. That order, they can request it under the family violence statute or the stalking statute. And the process goes as follows. First and foremost, they're going to come to the court, they'll fill out a petition, and oftentimes we are blessed to have individuals from the Women's Resource Center that assist these petitioners in filling out the petitions and helping them with the process. Once they've completed the petition, they'll come and they'll speak to a judge on duty, and today I'm the judge on duty as well. They'll come and they'll talk to us to determine whether or not there is enough information for us to issue an ex parte protective order. That ex parte protective order is only good for about 30 days. Within that 30-day time period, we're going to schedule a hearing where we'll hear from both parties, the petitioner as well as the respondent. And the respondent in this case is the person that they are saying is the abuser in their situation. We'll have a full hearing, and they can introduce any information or evidence, witnesses, and after we hear from both parties, we'll make a determination as to whether or not we can issue a 12-month protective order. If we issue a 12-month protective order, this is what that means. For 12 months, that respondent must stay away from the petitioner, period. There shall be no contact whatsoever, no phone calls, no text messages, no emails, no voicemails, no Twitter, no Facebook, no Instagram, no Kik, nothing. They cannot contact them through a third party, and we often see when we see violations of this order that is what's happening. They can't ask grandma or mom or neighbor or friend or, unfortunately, a child to send a message to that victim to say, hey, I need for you to call me, I need for you to contact me, I need for you to meet up with me. There shall be no contact whatsoever. In addition, they've got to stay at least 100 yards away from the individual. That 100 yards, as I tell everyone that comes before me, is about the size of a football field. If you have any questions about the size, if you can make out that other person fairly well, you're probably too close to them unless you have x-ray vision. So you want to stay away from them. We will put things in the order to assist the parties during that 12-month period of time. If they have a home in common, if they're a legal guardian to the children, we'll make provisions if there needs to be some type of supervised exchange for visitation or supervised visitation, if someone or the other needs to have custody and care and control of the home or a split of the cars or who pays what, we'll handle those matters. But the sole purpose of these protective orders is to keep individuals safe. That is our number one priority with this court, and we take it very seriously. We try to take the time to hear from each and every person that comes before us and provide them with the resources to assist them. Again, we have individuals in that courtroom from the Women's Resource Center. We have individuals from the courtroom from the Solicitor's Office and the DeKalb Volunteer Lawyers Foundation. And everyone works in a concerted effort to assist the individuals that come with those protective order requests to help them for their safety going forward. That's the civil side of things. The other thing that our office does is we facilitate criminal warrant applications. And person can come to the criminal division of the magistrate court, and that is located by the jail off Memorial Drive on Camp Circle. When you come there, you can ask the court to put you on a calendar because you believe someone's committed a crime against your person. You can say, hey, look, I called the police and they did not make an arrest because they didn't find that there was enough evidence to make an arrest, or perhaps the police weren't called for some reason, but you still believe that a crime was being committed. Maybe it's harassing phone calls. Maybe it's truly a case of battery. Maybe someone's damaged your property. Someone's gotten upset with you and they've decided to take it out on your belongings and bleach your clothing or cut up your clothing or throw rocks in your car. These are all instances that I've heard just this week. And because of that, you feel a crime was committed and you want there to be not only some type of protection, but you feel that criminal prosecution should also occur. You can come to the court, fill out a one-page request. You'll sit down and you'll talk to a judge. That judge is going to talk to you about what you feel happened as far as a crime. Where was the location of the alleged crime? Who was the alleged perpetrator? What information do you have about that individual? After we speak with you, we'll set it down for a hearing. Most of those hearings occur on Tuesdays. And once we set it down for a hearing, the alleged perpetrator will be given notice of that hearing date and time. We'll sit down, we'll hear from both parties at the hearing, and we'll determine whether or not there's probable cause to issue an arrest warrant after hearing from the parties. If we find there's probable cause, we will issue an arrest warrant then after that hearing. So even though you call the police and maybe the police don't make an arrest, that does not mean that you still cannot go forward and seek justice. You can come to the court and make a request for a criminal warrant application, talk to a judge, and see if there's enough for it to be put on a hearing. And again, we would hear from both parties to determine whether there is enough to issue a criminal arrest warrant. Flipping back over to the civil side of things for our protective orders, once we issue a 12-month protective order, part of that protective order, besides the stay away and the no contact, it's also a requirement in our family violence cases. And of course, those are cases where there's a relationship between the parties. They have a child in common. They're married. They live in the same home together. There's some blood relationship between the parties. There's a requirement that those individuals, those respondents, once that order's been issued, go to a 24-week family violence intervention program. And they have to report back to our court for a compliance calendar hearing to show that not only are they abiding by the terms of the order, but that they are actually attending the family violence intervention program. That is a requirement of that order. So they will come back to the court. They'll be given that court date before they leave after that hearing, and they'll have to show our court that they're in compliance. If they are not abiding by the order, if they're violating the order, the other party may file a contempt action against them, or the police may get involved. A violation of a temporary protective order could amount to aggravated stalking, and that's a felony. So we always let people know what their options are on the civil side as well as the criminal. Oftentimes, the individuals that come before us have two strains. They'll have a criminal case that's coinciding with that request for that civil protective order. But our court is here to serve you. We're here to help you and as well as make sure that you are safe. Domestic violence is a priority for us. It is something that is irrespective of persons, irrespective of gender. We are seeing a rise in a lot of our same-sex couples that are coming before us. Unfortunately, we're seeing a rise in a lot of younger people that are coming before us, much, much, much too young. And when they do come before us, it is not the first time. It seems that they've been in a long-term history of violence before they ever step forward in one of our courtrooms. So I would encourage each one of you to continue to spread the word, continue to get the information out there. And I do want to thank again the Solicitor General's office, but also all of the partners that we have here in this room today that have all pledged their time and their dedication to eradicating domestic violence. This is 100% preventable. And I hope that there will be a time in the future that we wouldn't have the need to have this. But I want to thank you for your time and for allowing the court to come forward and present to you this morning.
Now, we have one of three very special speakers that are here with us today who knows a lot more about domestic violence than most of us. Tamiko Lowry, who is the founder of the Still Standing Foundation, is a survivor of domestic violence herself. She formed her nonprofit to help others who are victims and who are trying to recover from abuse. Ms. Lowry has received several awards for her work, including the Celebration Gospel Atlanta Rising Star Award and Career Magazine's 40 Movers and Shakers Under the Age of 40 Award. So please help me give a warm welcome to Ms. Tamiko Lowry.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Tamiko Lowry, and I am a survivor of domestic violence. That deserves a round of applause because a lot of people don't make it out. I know this is one of those types of events where you really don't know how to feel emotionally, but as a survivor, I embrace it and I celebrate it every day. So again, let's clap for the survivors because everybody doesn't make it out. Based on my experience with domestic violence, I formed the Still Standing Foundation, which is a nonprofit organization that focuses on empowering victims of domestic violence to become survivors. What I've learned that if you maintain a victim mentality and you don't learn from your mistakes, you will keep repeating that cycle over and over again, which is why our mission is to empower victims to become survivors. Because as a survivor, you know who you are now. You love yourself a little bit more, and you're less likely to repeat those same steps again as far as being in an abusive relationship. So let's go back to July 7th of 2007. My husband at the time was on a business trip, and I woke up that morning and I said, I'm leaving today. That was the day that I was tired, July 7th of 2007. I just remember it like it was yesterday. And my plan was to leave before he came home that day. He was due to come home from a business trip. And I kept saying, okay, Tamiko, pack your stuff, pack as much as you can, and just leave before he gets here. And I procrastinated, and I started to pack, and I heard him stick his key in the door. And so I'm like, okay, he's going to see me packing, he's going to get upset. So he came in and he's like, what are you doing? And I said, I'm packing, I'm leaving. I'm tired. I don't want to go through this anymore. And he said, well, let's go for a ride and let's talk about it. And I was nervous because I felt like if I got in that car with him that I wouldn't make it out alive. And so just let me tell you a little bit about abuse. Obviously, it's not always physical, but it is emotional, it is spiritual abuse, there is mental abuse, and of course the verbal abuse. I was spiritually broken. Like my spirit was just completely broken. I didn't love myself anymore. I didn't know who I was. My emotions were just torn. Mentally, I wasn't stable. I suffered from depression, and this is all because of the way I was talked down to. You're stupid. You shouldn't talk. Nobody wants to hear what you have to say. You don't look right in that outfit. You're not cute. It was just, he tore me down to the point where I thought that I deserved it at one point. Like I said, I had high blood pressure because of this. I suffered from migraines. So domestic violence is also a public health issue because it affects your health. So I had migraines. I had high blood pressure. My liver started to fail because I was taking BC powders and Tylenol to control the migraine. So now my liver is starting to fail. And I'm also taking Lexapro, or I think it was Lexapro I was taking for depression. So I'm like on 5 or 6 medications. I'm 33 years old. And I call that my Jesus Christ year because Jesus Christ was 33 when he was crucified. And I just felt like I was being crucified. So that was when I was 33. So tells you about how old I am now. But so back to that day, he said, let's go for a ride and let's talk about it. And so I knew he always had a gun on him. And I was like, let me just get in the car and be nice and ride and we'll talk this out. And so he told me to drive. And I'm driving the car. We're on Interstate 85. And he said, so you going to leave me today? And I said, yes, I can't do this anymore. I said, okay, I tell you what, if you leave me, I'm going to kill both of us. So at that point, he proceeded to take the steering wheel from me and try to force us into a car accident. And somehow I was able to maintain control of the vehicle and pull over to the side of the road. And at that point, he just started to hit me. I mean, punch me like I was a man, like I was somebody in a boxing ring. I just remember him hitting me in my head, hitting the window. And then he choked me, and after that, I think I must have blanked out or I was unconscious, because when I woke up, I heard something say, "Tamika, wake up." And I'm very spiritual. I go to church, and I'm like, okay, who just told me to? I opened my eyes, and I was in the middle of Interstate 85, literally laying there, almost unconscious, with cars swerving around me. Cars were blowing their horns, trying to prevent from hitting me. I don't even remember how I got there. The only thing that I know that a onlooker said he drug you out of the car and left you on the highway. So at that point, I stood up, and I saw him standing near the car, and he said, "Get your in the car so we can go home." And I was like, "I'm not going home." And so I started to run back up the side of the road, and I saw a car parked, and the passenger said, "Hey, we saw everything that happened. We called 911. The police are on the way." And so the police came, and they arrested my then husband, and that was the day that I left. So I made it out, and not everybody else does. I believe that I had a guardian angel. So statistics show that every 9 seconds, a woman is being abused. So if you count to 9, 1, 2, 3, 4, and I'm counting fast, but 6, 7, 8, 9, somebody was just slapped. Another 9 seconds, somebody might have been just pushed down the stairs. So it's a serious, very serious situation, and I'm thankful for the DeKalb County Solicitor General for having this event today, and for all of you that are here to take part in this. It is so important that we be a voice to those people who don't have a voice. I'm going to fast forward a little bit to August 9th of 2009. This is 2 years after I left my abusive situation. For those 2 years, I could not figure out why I had to go through it. I was like, okay, God, I'm a good person. I thought I was a good wife. You know, why did I have to go through this? Why did this man hurt me the way that he did? And so on August 9th, 2009, I was sitting in church. And you know how you think the pastor is talking to you, and you're like, how does he know? Who told him that? And so I'm sitting there, and he's preaching from the scripture, Romans 8:28. All things work together for the good of them that love the Lord, who are called according to his purpose. And I kept thinking, purpose. And at that moment, it hit me. I was like, okay, so my purpose is based off of the pain that I went through. And I knew I always wanted to help women. I just didn't know how. Like, okay, how do I help women? I want to be this person that helps them in the area of self-esteem, because that's something that I struggled with for a long time. And so that day, I knew that I had to help women who are domestic violence victims. Who else could help them but somebody that's already been through it and had to struggle to regain my self-confidence and my self-esteem and to build myself up. And so I just wanted to be a vessel for other women, which is how I birthed the Still Standing Foundation. Still Standing Foundation is based off of the scripture, Psalm 62:2. He is my rock and my salvation. He is my fortress. I shall not be moved. So I'm still standing. So if it wasn't for that rock to hold me and to be my fortress, I wouldn't be still standing. And so that's how I birthed the Still Standing Foundation. Again, I'm thankful to be here today. I just shared a little bit of my story with you. That was the end when he tried to kill me, but there is so much more that happened in those. It was only 5 years. It feels like it was 20 years, but there's so much more that happened. Just being called out my name, being thrown outside in the middle of the day naked, and he locked the door. I mean, there was just so many things that happened, but I'm just honored to be able to share my story with you today. I am definitely a domestic violence advocate. I love working with young people, teaching them about healthy relationships and how to set boundaries. A lot of them don't know. Certain music that they listen to embraces abuse. It embraces men disrespecting women. And so I will come out to your venue, your youth group, and talk to the young girls and the young guys for free, because that's how passionate I am about it. I wish that I had somebody to pour into me when I was that age to teach me what a healthy relationship looked like. But I leave you today just saying thank you again for allowing me this opportunity to share my story. If you are in a domestic violence situation, it is not your fault. You don't deserve it. There are different organizations that are here today that can help you. Come talk to me personally. I can sit down with you and we can put together a survivor safety plan so that you can exit in a safe way. I'm getting a little bit emotional. Sometimes I start to cry, so I'm going to leave now. But thank you. Thank you.
Reminder to everyone that we are live tweeting today, and to everyone that's having the opportunity to watch this live on DCTV, please continue to tweet your comments. My Twitter handle is at SherryBostonSG, and we are doing hashtag DKDV as well as hashtag domestic violence awareness. And people have been very active on Twitter today, and I've been really excited about that. So let's continue to spread the message about domestic violence. Now I'm going to have an opportunity to talk to you about what we do in the Solicitor General's office and how my office prosecutes domestic violence cases. Of the more than 12,000 cases that my office handles each year, domestic violence crimes are some of the most important and some of the most challenging. For that reason, when I came into office, I created the Special Victims Unit to manage these cases and make sure they get the attention that they require. The Special Victims Unit is comprised of lawyers, investigators, victim witness advocates, a paralegal, and an administrative assistant. In addition to screening every domestic violence case that comes into my office, this unit directly prosecutes crimes such as high-risk DV cases. These are your repeat offenders, serious abuse cases where the violence is escalating and we are particularly concerned about the safety of the victim. This unit also prosecutes elder abuse, sex offenses, and animal cruelty, where we often see an overlap with domestic violence. Our advocates work closely with victims to provide them with the resources that they need. We have a DVPTI program, which is a DV diversion program for low-level offenders, where the goal is to stop the violence before it gets worse by requiring domestic violence classes for those offenders. And all domestic violence cases are screened by the Special Victims Unit to determine the most appropriate track that case should be in our office. The goal is to educate and prevent domestic violence when possible, and also to prosecute and seek punishment when appropriate. So what does this all mean in terms of a coordinated community response? Well, my team of prosecutors, investigators, and victim witness advocates work to bring justice to victims and hold batterers accountable. Our goal is to prevent domestic violence homicides. We work closely with many direct service providers in DeKalb to make sure that victims have the support services they need as their cases move through the criminal justice system. But we can't do this all alone. We need your help. So often, our cases do not have the evidence that is required to move forward in the court of law. We need you as family, friends, and neighbors who see domestic violence happening to do a few things for us. First, believe a victim when they make an outcry, and don't turn a blind eye to what you're observing. 2, too many times after a domestic violence fatality, the people in the victim's life start to connect the dots. Let's help connect those dots before that ultimate price is paid. 3, help the victim connect with emergency and support services. 4, seek guidance from professionals in the field, especially if you are considering confronting an abuser. This can be extremely dangerous. 5, let the victim know you will always be there for them. Leaving an abusive relationship, as I stated before, is dangerous, And it's complicated. It's not easy, and it can't be done overnight. Do not get frustrated if the process takes longer than you think it should take. Finally, assist with gathering evidence that later can be used in court and help take some of the burden off those victims. Take pictures. Everybody nowadays has a cell phone in their purse with a camera and video capability, right? We see something, the first thing we do is take out our phones. Take out your phone and document it. Help them do what maybe they can't or aren't able to do just yet. Save it. Don't delete those photographs. Provide a statement to the police. Again, oftentimes, the most challenging piece to prosecuting a DV case is that we don't always have the assistance of a victim. They may be too scared, too frightened to come to court and testify. They may still be in a relationship with their abuser. But we can always use the testimony of other witnesses. So if you can help, don't be afraid to help. Work with prosecutors when they need you. If you are able and you are willing and you are not fearful, because so many are, then we'll use your help to help any victim that needs it. So we have a lot of services here today and a lot of wonderful people with a lot of information. So what can you do, again, if you're sitting at home? Because I can't tell you how excited I am today that we have the support of DeKalb County and our BOC, and that we're able to reach the over 700,000 residents here in DeKalb County. That's pretty amazing, isn't it? And so if you're sitting at home and you're wondering, how can I get help? Where can I go? I've heard about all these amazing organizations that are there today, but I'm seeing this on TV. They're not there in the room where I can just reach out. You can call the solicitor's office. Our number is 404-371-2201. And the only thing you need to say is, I need help. And we will connect you with advocates in our office, investigators in our office, and all of these amazing organizations here today that offer the services, the help, the hand, the place to stay, the counseling, the legal services, everything you need, we will connect you with. So don't be afraid if you just want to ask a question. We're here for you when you're ready, whether that's now, tomorrow, or next year. We don't judge. That's not what we're here to do. We're just here to be an ear and a shoulder for you to lean on. And before we move on with our program, once again, I want to thank Verizon Wireless and their Hope Line program for being a corporate sponsor today. Because of them, we were able to have this lovely breakfast for you all this morning, so thank you. And again, we are collecting previously owned and used cell phones, both here at our program, and up until Monday, you can drop a phone in the box at the solicitor's office, which is located in the courthouse on the 5th floor in the administrative offices. Or you can also drop a phone at Caverna Coffee Shop, located in downtown Oakhurst. They're also collecting used cell phones, Verizon Hope Line, and so you know those phones and those proceeds go directly to providing domestic violence survivors and people in relationships with the ability to call 911 and to make emergency phone calls if they are in need of help. So now, moving on with our program, I would like to introduce my friend, Aparna Bhattacharya, and I struggle with that every time, Aparna, who is the executive director of Raksha. And it's a nonprofit that promotes a stronger and better South Asian community. She was recently named a champion of change at the White House. That gives me chills just saying that. But yes, our very own was honored by our president, Barack Obama, for her work on behalf of battered women. Her many awards include being named one of Georgia's 25 most influential Asian Americans, and she serves on the board of the Georgia Coalition Against Domestic Violence and the National Immigrant Women's Advocacy Project. And she's here to talk about domestic violence in the immigrant and refugee community. So please help me in welcoming my friend, Aparna.
How are y'all doing? What an honor it is to be here, and what an honor it is that our Solicitor General has done this for 3 years in a row. And I've got to say, this is an amazing office to work with. And when we're talking about refugees and immigrants, I love working with the DeKalb County Solicitor General's office, and I'll tell you why. Because they care about the community, they're willing to learn what they don't know, and they're willing to ask. Many of the staff have come to trainings that we've put on, and there's just a strong commitment. So I always know there's a phone call when someone doesn't know what's going on, but they're also willing to respond in a way that is safe for immigrant survivors. Now, we're talking about immigrant survivors, and we all know that domestic violence affects all of our communities. What becomes difficult is when you don't speak the language, when you don't understand the legal terms. Now, I know legal terms are already complicated. Most of us don't understand them. But when you don't have the language and you don't have an interpreter that can interpret that for you, it can become even more difficult. And then we're going to add on a layer about immigration status. What does that have to do with it? Well, immigration status causes a lot of fear. The one reality is, it has nothing to do with DeKalb County, is that we live in a state that has an immigration law. And that immigration law makes it hard for survivors to feel safe in coming forward. They're scared that if they get stopped, that they could end up in deportation proceedings. And ending up in deportation proceedings is different than being in jail, because you don't have the same access and the same rights that you would in getting to jail. And again, you'd have to speak the language to ask for the attorney. You'd have to already have an attorney. And if you don't have all that, you end up being separated from your kids. And that's what happens to a lot of immigrant survivors in Georgia. Now, the reality is there is immigration relief available for many survivors. And I don't know how much y'all know about immigration, but you have to, of course, be married to a citizen or green card holder to be able to get that relief. If you're undocumented, you would have to apply for a special visa called a U visa. Now, while DeKalb County PD is amazing in responding to those U visas, there are some cities in DeKalb County that won't even sign them. So I love Jay, Marty, I love you both. You're amazing. Thank you for doing the amazing stuff you do, but there are some counties that have international populations that won't sign off on them. So where's that justice for those survivors? They can't access. And the reality is, when you don't have immigration status, that means you cannot work. Also means you cannot drive. So how do you get around in a city that has limited transportation? How do you get what you need? You cannot access certain classes. You can't get English classes. So even if you're waiting for your immigration status to be coming, you can't even take an English class because the state of Georgia won't allow that. So how do you better yourself? How do you stay in shelter? To be able to even get that relief, it can take 6 months to a year. So if you can't work, you don't have income coming in, because then you might have to work under the table. You can't drive, how do you support yourself? So those barriers are there, and that's why we need our community to know what's happening. And I think when we're talking about making policy changes, one of the things that we do have to look at for survivors is immigration reform. It makes a difference if you can't get a U visa, or if there's a U visa cap. It makes a difference if your law enforcement officers won't sign off on U visas. And it makes a difference if a law enforcement officer won't even write a report because they are not getting an interpreter, or they don't see the value of helping you because you may not speak English or you might be an undocumented immigrant. And like I said, we're really lucky to be in DeKalb County, but we have a lot of immigrant survivors who aren't in DeKalb County and who do face those challenges. It's important to know about the cultures. DeKalb County is one of the most diverse counties in the state of Georgia, and we have many cultures and many religions that reside here. And being able to know about those cultures and religions makes it important to be able to do the outreach that we need to do it. There were 5 survivors of domestic violence from my particular community, the South Asian community, who died, who were on the Remember My Name list. And they all hit pretty close to home. I want to say, and granted, they were all in Alpharetta, but they all had ties to DeKalb County. One individual worked in DeKalb County, and she was killed by her husband, as well as her 2 sons, and then the husband killed himself. Another one, and actually one of the faith-based communities that they worshiped in was also in DeKalb County. The other survivor also worshiped in DeKalb County. Thinking about that we were probably about 10% of the names on this list kind of sends a chill down my spine, and it scares me for my own community and how much more work we have to do. So when we're doing the faith-based work, that we do it not just in the communities that we're used to, but we spread this work to the communities that are connected to us and still in our community, even though we may not see them. Language access is so important. One of the things Jamila and I were talking about earlier today was the importance of that when you're getting an interpreter, that it's important that you get the interpreter ahead of time so that the case is not reset a number of times and you're not having to have a survivor take time off a number of times for a court case that will not occur. The other thing is to make sure there's no conflict of interest, because our communities, while they may seem big, they are small and people know each other. So to make sure that individuals don't have family members or somebody that might be an in-law interpreting for them, which can happen in some of the courthouses. I'm not saying DeKalb County does it, but I'm just saying it's happened in other courthouses. The other important thing is to think about the youth. We have a lot of undocumented youth in our communities who are victims of domestic violence who will not call because of their immigration status. And I'm really grateful that there is something called deferred action for youth, which can help them apply, but that keeps them from going to colleges in our state. And so then they become more vulnerable to being victimized and being taken advantage of or ending up in unhealthy relationships. When we're talking about a safety plan with immigrant survivors, it's a little bit different. We had one situation in which the husband kept using the police system to continue to have his wife arrested, or using the court system. And the reality is, if you're undocumented and you end up in the court system, depending on where you are, there could be negative consequences. Because if you don't have status, they could put you into deportation proceedings because you're not legally here. The other reality is we have a lot of women who might be driving, or survivors who might be driving without a license. Because like I said, you can't get a driver's license in the state of Georgia. And so knowing that those realities occur make it unsafe for survivors to come forward. So when you're doing a safety plan, you want to let them know the risks of how are they going to get around safely. If there is a court thing, who are they going to call and what's their safety plan? And what are they going to tell the immigration officers? So if you are ending up in a situation where you could be in deportation proceedings, it's important to let the immigration officers know that you are a victim of domestic violence. Our government does have special programs for survivors, but our survivors need to know to let the immigration officers know so that they can connect them to those resources. Now, not all immigrant survivors will have access to that relief. There's a big list of things that you have to put together when you're applying, and you have to be connected to immigration lawyers. And we have great programs. Latin American Association was here earlier, and they provide immigration relief for survivors, as does Catholic Charities and the Georgia Asylum and Immigration Network. So knowing those immigration resources to connect survivors quickly so that they can file for that relief is really important, so that they don't end up with unintended consequences, being stopped and ending up in deportation proceedings or having an arrest made by their batterer, because batterers will do what it takes to prevent someone from getting the justice they deserve. The other thing I want you all to think about when we talk about domestic violence is to broaden our lens. It's not just about intimate partners in many communities. And for I can tell you from the South Asian community, there could be in-laws that are part of the abuse. And I'm sure that for many of you might even say, yes, I know, My in-laws are abusive too. So it's not just the South Asian community, but it's something to keep in mind. The other trend that we're seeing is young girls who are being forced to be married by their parents. So the other lens of how we're looking at domestic violence is these forced marriages of young girls. And it's not just the South Asian community, it's a growing number of communities. There was a recent study in New York where a number of kids from various cultures were getting threats to be forced into marriages. The other thing is looking into honor violence. Sometimes our own families, it's not safe for us to even be within our own families, and our own families may be not as supportive, but there's also the threat of safety from our own families. So when we're also looking at violence, looking at if there are threats from our own family, if we're choosing to leave an abusive situation or the dishonor that they may bring. It's really important to learn about the different laws. We've had some complicated situations where knowing about international marriages, what are valid and what aren't, are important, but really being able to ask those questions. So when working with international survivors, let's not let the accents or the language ever be a hindrance, because at the end of the day, it's our warm hearts that make people feel comfortable and safe, and find ways to make those connections. Let's learn more about immigration. Let's make our voices heard. Let's support immigration reform so more survivors can get access. And let's find ways that where it doesn't take so long and we don't have as many barriers. Thank you so much.